So it's 10 a.m. We do have a quorum. We'll wait another minute to see if other members are able to join us. We do know that Sarah Boyce is not going to be here today. She's messaged in advance. So we have Gary.
Good morning.
Good morning, Gary. Good morning, Graham and Jen. All right, well, I will call this meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee to order. It is February 23rd. For this meeting, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use their full name or who acts inappropriately. I'm Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. To get started, I'll confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Gary Beller.
Aye.
Sarah Boyce has told us she is not here today. Peter Brace.
Aye.
Graham Durovich.
Present.
I do not see Matt Fee on the screen. Ian Golding.
Yes.
Jen Carper.
Here.
Fritz McClure.
Yes.
And I'm Mary Longacre. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Vince Murphy.
Here.
And I do not see any other staff members, and we do not have speakers anticipated for this agenda. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirements of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. Time permitting, this meeting will feature public comment. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to share the screen on your computer or device. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Briefly, I do note that we have somebody identified as M. Wilson. If you would like to change your name, or you can send a chat message to Town Committee 2 to Vince Murphy, he can change it for you so that you can be properly identified. Thank you. Before we move to the first item on the agenda, I will cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Additionally, I'll remind the public that comments can be sent to Vince Murphy by email or phone or print. His email is vmurphy@nantucket-ma.gov. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Okay. So on today's agenda, we have a number of announcements. Again, just a reminder that if there are live events that members of the committee are planning to attend, let Vince know so that we can track whether or not we have a quorum and would need to post meeting for that event. The Coastal Resilience Plan Iris app is available for download. The agenda that's posted on the town's website has live links with the App Store and Google Play icons. So those can be clicked on in order to go directly to the site where you can download those apps. The nice thing about the app is it allows 24/7 access to the project team so that the members of the public who aren't able to attend a public event are able to provide feedback and interact with the team anytime it's convenient for them. If you are not using the app but want to get notifications, or if you are using the app and still want to get the email notifications, we have a link to sign up to be on the email list from the project team as well. Resilient Nantucket Designs for Adaptation has a final review scheduled for March 12th of their guidelines, and then a public presentation in April as noted in the agenda. We will wait until closer to the date to find out if we need to post that as a Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee meeting as well. And I'll note that that coincides with Earth Day, something that Holly mentioned. The Envision Resilience Nantucket Challenge Speaker Series is continuing. I watched the two most recent presentations, including one from our own Dr. Jen Carberg and Dr. Sarah Boyce. And I think I said this last time, but I'm going to repeat it because it strikes me so significantly. These lectures are designed for people who are not familiar with Nantucket. And I find it to be a really interesting perspective to watch those, to be reminded sometimes of what our biases are and what we just assume. And yet that's not the case. It's not a permanent situation. There are things that can be questioned. And I think that's part of the value of the Envision Resilience Nantucket Challenge, is that it's opening up to people who don't have biases about Nantucket the opportunity to contribute creative ideas. The other presentation I watched featured two of the Arcadis team members, and that was very interesting because we got to look at them as they were looking at us. So I would recommend that presentation again to people. It was Arcadis talking about how they, in general, conduct these sorts of plan projects, but also specifically talking about the Nantucket plan and how they're working on that. And I thought that was a very interesting perspective as well. So I would recommend that to you. The speaker series continues through, I think, March and April. Not sure if it goes into May. And then also Acclimate maintains an event calendar, and the link for that is there. So resources for us and for the public. And then, as always, our meetings are recorded and available on YouTube if you want to watch a meeting that you have missed. And the recording of the January 28th virtual open house for the Coastal Resilience Plan is also available on YouTube with the link provided. Okay. So any comments on the events? Does anybody else watch them and wants to provide a perspective? Peter?
Just no perspective. The woman, is it Lisa Craig? Is that her name? No.
Lisa Craig is the Craig Group working on Resilient Nantucket most
Right.
prominently.
She contacted me and has conscripted me to be, basically I'm going to be opening the virtual community forum on the 23rd and the 24th of April by interviewing, I can't remember his last name, but his first name is Phil, and he's from England, and I'm going to interview him. They're going to have a script, and anyway, just so that you guys know that I'm doing that. From a natural history perspective, I guess is how I'm going to do it.
So I'm glad that you're involved. Anyone else with a comment or a perspective on the various other events that you want to share? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the first item on the agenda, actually the fifth item on the agenda, review of the draft homeowners brochure. And Sarah is not here. Graham, did you want to offer any perspective as a member of the education subcommittee that worked to create this?
I think everyone in the meeting right now is their last meeting, and I think Sarah did a really good introduction. So if anyone has any questions, I think Mary and I would be happy to answer them, or if anyone needs a refresher. But I think we've talked a fair bit about it already.
So our changes from the last meeting were to add the link to Resilient Nantucket on page 1. Vince, if you want to scroll up, there we go, which has been done. And then on the second page, change the red and green color scheme to what we have here is the navy blue and white, with one being the text and the other being the background. And I think that actually worked pretty well. And the green accents for other things. And then we added our logo to page 2. Down at the bottom, there's that new stripe there. I have a couple of little tiny details. There's a line that got lost and another one that's superfluous, but they're minor edits. On the first page, Vince, if you want to scroll back for a second, the resilience equation on the top left, that got a little jumbled in its layout somehow. So we can make a note to put that back the way it was, where the equals is more in line with the plus and centered in that space. But does anyone have comments on this brochure? I don't see Holly. I don't know. I don't think she's joined us. Vince, I think you had a response from Holly about the planning or the plus department's reaction to the brochure. Vince, you're muted. Yeah, there you go.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Hopefully I am. Thank you. So I contacted Paul Murphy in the planning department, as had been one of the plans, to make sure that there wasn't anything in this that was contrary to building code. I got a response from him saying that it looked fine from his point of view. Holly was also taking it to Resilient Nantucket project leaders to see if there was any contradictory things in that, and as I understand it, no one's responded negatively yet, so it seems like that's okay too.
So there's one question, if we go back to page 2, that I have for the committee, and that is at the bottom. We wanted to add some language. Right now it says knowing the risk for your home can help you prepare for resiliency. I'm just not sure that prepare for resiliency is helpful to somebody looking at the brochure. I wasn't sure if anybody could come up with better language of what we're trying to prepare people for. And maybe it's just me, but I wanted to see if anybody else had thoughts there. Vince?
Aid resiliency. Help.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
To help you aid resiliency.
That doesn't help me.
Okay.
How about knowing the risks for your home prepares you to be resilient, or Peter, you're a wordsmith. Do you have anything to suggest?
Yeah, I don't know why we're avoiding the term sea level rise, because that's what we're talking about, preparing for sea level rise.
Well, the brochure is intended to address flooding from all sources.
Okay.
So for instance, my Mid-Island home isn't really threatened from sea level rise, but all of these tips can apply in a flooding situation, from rain, also from plumbing emergencies.
But if that's the case, then why didn't we come out with this brochure 20 years ago? We're talking about sea level rise. Everybody knows that. We should say it, I think.
So maybe you should just say, helps you prepare for flooding and sea level rise.
So the brochure is titled Improving Coastal Resilience at Home. So there's definitely a nod to the coastal part of that. And then subtitled A Nantucket Guide for Minimizing Water Damage to Your Property. So there is a good point on the front of the brochure. Defining coastal resilience means building the ability of a community to bounce back after hazardous events such as hurricanes, coastal storms, and flooding, rather than simply reacting to impacts. That's from NOAA. So we are kind of trying to have it both ways. I'd like to hear from other people. You know, okay, lots of hands, great. So just going down the stream, Jen, and then we'll get to Ian and Fritz.
Thank you, Mary. I was just going to say the sentence says knowing the risk, but the brochure isn't really necessarily talking about assessing risk. I wonder if we wanted to say something along the lines of, you know, adapting your home now will help make you more resilient for sea level rise and flooding. I liked what Gary said about adding both. You can add both that sea level rise and hit what Peter's saying, and other flooding options, but maybe making this a little bit more of a positive statement, because we're not telling them how to figure out their risk, but we're telling them how to make small changes in their house now that will make them more resilient.
Okay.
Something like that.
Ian, feedback?
Yes, thank you, Mary. And I absolutely agree that I think sea level rise should be added. And I would have thought, while you have the header in larger capitals, protect your home from damage due to flooding, and the second sentence in the smaller letters, you could just add for flood damage and sea level rise. So I think, as Peter says, it's way past due for us to make it absolutely clear why we are all sitting here discussing this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good point. Thank you, Ian. So, Vince, do you want to add a note up at the top for the subheader on page 2, where Ian was indicating to add sea level rise? And then Fritz, who's next?
Yes, and you took the language away, but to me, what we were just the language we were just working on gets a little wordy. So knowing the risk for your home prepares you to be resilient. Adapting your home now will help. So it seems to me that we've used the word resilient a lot, but I'm not sure that in all cases people really fully understand what resilience means. I mean, they know what resilient means as a word, but I think we need to be just more direct. So I would suggest maybe leaving out the word or the reference to resilient, and I don't know what, I can't see all the language, but basically something about the risk to your home by or something, risk to your home prepares you to adapt your home.
You know, we don't have to go
For
that
flooding and sea level. I mean, you know, just a more concise statement. I don't know. It seems word.
Gary, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, maybe you don't have to quite go that far. If that second sentence at the top says flood damage and rising tides, at the bottom, well, we could say knowing the risk for your home can help you prepare, because we're talking about flood damage and rising tides at the top, and saying knowing the risk to your home can help you prepare, so that we don't have to wrestle with that word resiliency.
Well, I'm a little bothered by knowing the risk, because this brochure doesn't talk about knowing the risk. It talks about preparing your home to resist flood damage. And I would say, you know, preparing your home is more what we're trying to tell people to do, not just knowing the risk. Jen?
I agree with all the wordiness. I really hate wordsmithing like this online. We go in all directions. But I think with what you just said, you could easily say something like, adapt your home now to be prepared, and keep it concise. Since I agree, we have said sea level rise and flooding up above. So you just need like a statement that draws people in. I don't know, something like that.
And Vince?
I'm sorry, I just want to go back one sec. I don't think I captured what Gary was saying at all. I just want to make sure I write down what Gary was saying. What wording were you looking for? You're on
Gary,
mute.
you're muted.
Sorry. The question was really, do you need the word resiliency? If you have flood damage at the top and sea level rise, then basically what we're talking about, instead of the word, you don't really need, we're really talking about that this will help you prepare for what? Well, we set up above for flood damage and sea level rise, and says, knowing the risks for your home. But I also like what Jennifer said as well, might be a good solution.
Thank you.
Graham?
What about something even more simple, just saying adapt now to protect your property or protect your home? Because we know,
What about just protect your home? Short and sweet. Because I agree that you want to be direct here. And I don't think the original language really provides a direct statement. It's very, it's very couched in vague language. You know, what does knowing the risk mean? What does prepare for resiliency mean? You know, how about
I
just
like to protect your
prepare your
home.
home? Protect
Sounds
your home.
great.
Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing head nods. Any further, just change it to protect your home? Is that Gary?
Yeah, I like the way you say knowing the risk for your home can help. Well, knowing the risk can help you protect your home. I don't know if you want to say your home twice.
Anyone else? Is know the risk and protect your home any better than just protect your home? Or know the risk plural? Peter?
Protect your home from what?
Well, at the top it says protect your home from damage due to flooding.
Okay, but I still think sea level rise needs to be in there.
And in suggesting we put on
Protect your
that
home.
second line, preparing for flood damage and sea level rise.
Right.
Oh, below. Okay.
No,
I see.
up
Yeah,
above.
line 2 on the top. Yeah.
Okay. Because flood damage is anything. It's, you know,
Yeah.
a really wet spring, a lot of snow melting, someone who lives on a pond and the water comes up and their basement gets flooded. And that's something that happens all the time, regardless of sea level rise. Just think we need to be specific about it so people know what we're talking about and know why they're holding this brochure.
Okay, I'll note that Matt Fee is joining us at 10:23 for the minutes, Fritz. So Matt, we're reviewing the brochure and discussing the language in particular at the bottom of the second page in the center. We've pretty much, I think, had a consensus on adding sea level rise to the second line at the top after flood damage. Do you have anything that you want to add to the discussion? If you had a reaction to the brochure, we've been discussing how to change that language at the top, bottom, middle.
No, thanks. I'm sorry I'm late. I just got out of the bakery. No, I'm fine. You know, just move on
Okay.
without me.
Yeah.
I'll listen.
So Vince, I can't read what you've written in there. Where did we land?
Okay, so I was taking comments from everyone that as we went along, from Mary, Jen, Fritz, Gary, then Jen, then Graham, and then finally Mary's last comment. Know the risk and protect your home. Everyone can see my live notes, yes?
Yeah, I just can't read them on this. I've got the screen squinched down so I can see the people as well.
Should be know the risks.
Plural, yeah.
Should be plural.
Know the risks and protect your home. Know the risks to protect your home.
It's good and concise.
Yeah, I would say and, because knowing risk doesn't do a darn thing to protect your home unless you take action. So there are two things we want you to do. We want you to understand the risk and we want you to protect your home.
Everyone's happy with that?
Yep.
Great.
All right, I'm just going to remove the previous ones. So is everyone
Okay.
okay with me removing the previous ones?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just going, this box is just going to now say, know the risks and protect your home.
Great.
There was one more question that I had and was in the original comments when I was trying to have this edited again, which was to add contact information on this side. That didn't make it in. Opinions, if that's not an inappropriate thing for me to ask.
So I think the context for that was if we chose to make an image out of page 2 that would be shared electronically, that we would want contact information to be available to people who saw that image. What we have on page 1 under our logo is just the town's website. So on page 2, it's just our logo. I wonder if this could be changed so that that center text section goes from got flood to Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee logo. That would put our revised language all on the first line. And then the second line would be available for contact information. How does that sound to people? I'm not seeing any reactions. Ian,
Mary, could you say that again? I wasn't quite sure. Were you saying
okay.
Flood?
So
or...
yeah, so there's considerable blank space on either side of that center section. So I was thinking expand that where the 2 vertical lines are, push them out to the edges next to the other 2 elements. That gives us hopefully enough room to put our new text on the 1 line only instead of 2, and leave the space in the center on a second line for contact information. Ian, you were going to add something.
Thank you, Mary. I was just wondering, looking at this page, that where we have our logo, that the bottom half of the logo is exactly the same color as the bar. And I wondered whether there could be just a slight change in hue to the bar so that the logo is more striking. I'm just a variation of, just very slight variation rather than having it absorbed into exactly the same color. So I'm just throwing it out there as a very, very minor mod. If anybody wants to comment and say thank you.
I think you have a good point, Ian. What if we change that background color on the bottom bar to the gray that's used in the brochure rather than the blue? Just to keep the color scheme simple. I see a nod from Jen.
Matt, I'm not sure we even need the logo on this side. It's on the other side, correct?
We're talking about if this side is a standalone piece.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Yeah. So originally, yes, it was only on the first side, and we asked for it to be added to the second so that we could have the opportunity to make this standalone if it was electronically distributed.
Yeah, then I would say keep as little out of that box as possible and get the point across. If we add too much, it'll be a little overwhelming.
So in that vein, what do we want to add for contact information? The simplest would be resilientact.org as the website. Potentially, we could get crazy with all of Vince's, name, title, email, phone number. But I don't know that that's really useful. Jen?
I would keep it simple with just the website. And then if this does get shared on social media, you can always include more contact information with whatever you're sharing. But if the image is out there and a website to go to is out there, then I think that's probably enough.
And is everybody happy with resilientact.org? It'd be www.resilientact.org being shown on the brochure. it won't take anybody directly to a coastal resilience page. It goes to the community resilience, which then people have to navigate to find whatever they might be looking for. But it does have the benefit of showing people the breadth of what else is available on this topic, which I think is kind of what we'd be aiming for. Vince, do you know, is it Chuck's information that's on resilientact.org as project manager rather than yours?
Yeah, yes, it is Chuck's information. And then once you go into the various sections as you navigate through, you find Holly's information for the MVP project and mine for CRP, erosion, various other things. But yeah, that might not be the worst idea. I'll see if I can add maybe Holly and myself to that initial web page as well.
Okay, so other than a couple of little tweaks with, as I said, we lost a line in one place and we've got an extra line somewhere else. The other thing I saw, Vince, on that line 2, the Nantucket Coastal Resiliency with a Y advisory committee, that's the only place that we're actually using the Y. So I'd like to change that back to an E to match everything else on the brochure. And then not to take the committee's time, I can follow up with Vince about a couple of lines. Does anyone else have comments or suggestions for the brochure? Okay. So since we still have edits, we will ask Florencia to send a new version and it will probably come back to us, I hope at the next meeting, but probably sometime in March. I'm not sure if Florencia is on vacation this week as well. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the discussion about the new Arcadis contract for Baxter Road engineering feasibility assessment. So this was awarded by the select board. They did make one change. Matt, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, we made one change and we asked that the engineer that had worked on SBPF privately, 3 or 4 years ago, he's been removed. Another engineer will be assigned to the project. And other than that, it moved through.
Okay. So Vince, I asked Vince to talk to us about our role. I think to start, this is not a project that we have a supervisory or contributory role in how it's developed. This was a project that was initiated by town administration. So, but we are listed as a stakeholder. So if Vince, you want to flesh that out with whatever information you have available at this point.
Okay, thanks, Mary. So has everyone had a chance to read the scope? It was attached with the packet again this time. Everyone's been through it, or at least is somewhat familiar with it. So it's effectively organized into 4 tasks. And I went through it and I was trying to understand where the various tasks would need input from CRAC as well as others. So CRAC's key role in this is as a stakeholder. Sorry, I've got 2 screens and I've got notes on this screen that I made for myself this morning. So some CRAC members will also have multiple roles as their committees are also listed as project stakeholders. This applies particularly to Matt and to Ian, being from the Select Board and CONCOM respectively, as also listed as project stakeholders. One of the other stakeholders, Nantucket Coastal Conservancy, just note that Peter's a member, so he'll have a dual role as well. So task 1, oh sorry, I should probably also, yes. So I was looking at the management structure for this. This is a select board project. Libby Gibson approached myself and Jeff Carlson in recent weeks and asked about who's going to be the project manager. Libby asked if I could be the project manager, largely to tie up the loose ends with the overlap between Coastal Resilience Plan and this new plan, and make sure that we can have proper coordination. From the Arcadis side, it looks like Kate Edwards is likely to be the project manager from that side. She is probably known to many of you. She's the assistant from to Trevor at the moment on the Coast Resilience Plan. So she is also a bridge as well to make sure that the two plans marry up. So looking at task one, the task one of the 4 tasks is to review the background information. CRAC and other stakeholders will be canvassed for background information. This will include everything from reports and stakeholder opinions. The kind of things that we're going to be looking for are published reports, monitoring reports, reports from external independent consultants. I think the Coastal Conservancy and Land Council have had some of that work done. Concom, DEP and court decisions that happened along the way, and I'm perfectly open to taking any suggestions of any other information that any CRAC members think that I should be taking account of in getting the background information together. Anyone have any suggestions?
Jen?
I don't remember clearly. I'm sure it's in the record somewhere, but there's been at least 1 or possibly 2 graduate projects done based on stabilization out there on the cliff. Peter might even probably remember more than I do, since you've been on following that project for a long time. And then I think it makes sense to go back to all of the stuff that has happened even previous before that, with the beach nourishment and the dredging and all those other things that have been explored out there as well. I think, putting all that information on the table will be important. There's a lot that's been done out there.
Thank you, Jen. Peter?
And Vince, I wrote countless stories for the Coastal Conservancy during the original process, going to the Conservation Commission meetings and writing about that. And then some stories on the expansion. Plus, there's all my time writing for the Nantucket Independent, as well as the Nantucket Beacon. For instance, I was at the Beacon covering the formation of SBPF in November of 1993. So I've got stories going all the way back. If you give me certain topics, then I can look for that and get them to you.
Perfect. I'll take it all.
Okay.
Peter, are the archives of the Independent and the Beacon included in the Athenaeum's website? Do you know?
They should be.
Okay, so Vince, that's a resource that you can let Arcadis know exists, the digital archive on the Athenaeum site for Nantucket papers.
And also, Vince, I have, although everybody else is now an accomplice, so you can't say anything, but I have the login credentials for the former owner of the paper for all the stories that I wrote for the Independent, if I needed to get at those stories. So.
All right, we'll talk about that one offline.
Yep.
Other comments from members? Okay, did that answer your question sufficiently, Vince, so you can proceed?
Yes, thank you. And this isn't the first time this is going to come up, or the last. I'm going to need input from the committee as well as all the other stakeholders. So I must just also mention quickly, at the moment, the stakeholder list includes, I think, 12, 13 different named groups. That's probably going to grow. I think there's other neighbors to the project area that are going to have to be included as well as other people with other specific interests, both onshore and offshore. And that was something that I've been chatting with NCC members about specifically, and thank you to Deanne Atherton for a conversation we had during the week, and hopefully see about getting some fisheries people involved. So that's that for the background information and stakeholders. Then stakeholder engagement.
Vince, Jen has a question, if I can interrupt.
Thank you, Mary. Sorry, Vince. And this might feed into, I apologize for what you're going to ask about next. But when you were talking about the number of stakeholders, and when I looked at the timeline of this, I have a little bit of concern that we're going to be overlapping pulling stakeholder information from the same groups for both this Sconset plan and our coastal resilience plan. Do we have a mechanism in place so that it would ever come, and I know it's the same consultant, and maybe it's just just stressing this, but whatever information comes out of stakeholder meetings on this plan also gets pulled into the larger plan as well, because we don't want to miss out on, this is important information for the larger plan as a whole.
Absolutely. No doubt in that fact whatsoever. And that's one of the reasons why Kate and I, who are already involved in one plan, are being put to task with the next one. And don't forget to bring that point up many times and often, please, so that we can make sure that the overlap is adequate and that, well, the two plans make sense together and in tandem. That was a concern that came up at this meeting 2 weeks ago and the select board meeting almost 2 weeks ago. So this is something that just has to be addressed to make sure that there is no conflict between those two plans at all, that they make sense together and are documents that are written in tandem with the same purpose. And this gets on to the next point, thanks. Task 2 is stakeholder engagement. So the stakeholder list currently stands at around 11, 12, but like I said, that's going to grow. So the stakeholders, it seems like from the scope, are going to be divided into 3 groups. This is just for ease, as I understand it, from the Arcadis point of view, for handling how information comes in, rather than say an individual meeting with every group that say certain groups might be put together. I don't know in what format yet. So each group will have 2 meetings. So CRAC is going to end up having 2 meetings with Arcadis about this. So yeah, and this is all about building consensus so that we can find direction. Then there's going to be 2 community or at-large meetings, and CRAC can attend those as well as any other group can as well. There was one question I had there. What was it? Yeah, it hasn't been decided how those groups are going to be broken up yet. And hopefully I'll be able to come back with information in the next couple of weeks or next month at any rate. So then task 3 is alternatives engineering feasibility analysis. So this is largely going to be an internal task for Arcadis, as I understand it, where they take all the materials from task 1 and task 2 and attempt to develop alternatives for roads and access. So I'm going to be quite plain on this. I have unresolved questions in this part as well. Like, will there be presentations from this task, from task 3, before we move on to task 4, which is the final report? Are there second meetings with each group in this task or at a later point? I don't know. Will stakeholders have an opportunity to provide further comment on task 3 as it develops? So I'm assuming that people will want to be involved as they're developing the plan and would like to see reports along the way. Would that be a fair assumption? Okay.
The head nods.
Yeah. So we're only getting into the organization of this now. So as this develops, I'll keep everyone up to date. It's about as much as I can say for now, because I don't actually know yet. Even I have unanswered questions. Task 4.
Vince, Matt has a question.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, one of the points I brought up is very similar at the select board meeting when we were talking about it, is very similar to Vince's. I'm concerned that we'll have 1 or 2 meetings without really having the options on the table for people to react to, and then they'll draw something up and hand it to us. So I think, I'm glad that Vince is, working closely with them and alongside our, both plans, because people need to know what the options are and what the costs are, et cetera, when we have the meetings, or the meetings will be, we don't know, and we'll be entrenched in, the 2 sides will be entrenched into don't do anything and only do what's out there. And we won't look at what other options might exist. And we might not look at what the time frame is. So I think it's really important that, those meetings are informed, and they assured us at our meeting that they would be. They did say it would be. So and the other point that I wanted to make earlier was, there's no intent to, cut CRAC out of this. Vince is going to be involved. The Coastal Resiliency Committee is going to be involved. And if we have questions, or comments or concerns, the goal is to make this as good as it can be, and to build the consensus around whatever we are doing. It's to stop the antagonism and try, figure out a way to, to move us forward positively. That's the goal. And so that's hopefully what we'll be able to do.
Thank you, Matt. And I'll just add that in the meetings that I've attended of various groups with Arcadis, that's been a lot of the reaction is, well, we can't really tell you what we want because we don't know what's available. And people really want to see something, drawn on paper to say, oh, we like A better than B and C is out of the question, but D looks really interesting if you can change it. That's what people are looking for in terms of public engagement. So yes, I would hope that if they're scheduling 2 meetings with each group, one would be initial and the second would be at that point where they're coming back with options for feedback. Fritz, go ahead.
Yes. I don't know whether this is the appropriate point, but I just have a comment. I don't know whether it's a concern, but just kind of a comment. And it's, if we were starting from scratch and we were and there wasn't any if there wasn't litigation regarding the regulatory process for permitting, I guess I'd understand what might come out of this. And as what I understand, it's going to come out of this is presenting 4 options, if I read the report study right. But so we get the 4 options. And I guess the question is, who's the we? The we is, I guess, the community and the town. But the point, I guess the point I'm trying to make is the litigation and the permitting is between Concom and SBPF. And I don't see that either one of them are bound by anything that this study comes up with. So it seems to me, as a lawyer, they could either side could just say, well, thank you very much for the study, but we don't agree with any of it and don't intend to do anything about any of it. So I guess that's where I'm sort of, I understand the process and what we're trying to come up with. And if this were part of the overall plan, our overall study, I guess I'd understand. They're going to come up with options, just like they're going to come up for options for Matticat or town or whatever. But I'm not sure what comes out of it. And Matt, maybe it's just your hope that given the options, the 2 sides will see something that makes them want to come to some agreement. But as I understand it, neither side's going to be bound by any of this. Am I correct?
Matt?
I think technically you're correct. My hope, and our hope, as a town is how do you, I'm trying to think, I hope we go further than just 4 options. I hope when the cost of these and the, potential timelines and et cetera, I hope when some of that is understood, I think there'll be I think this will be at a slightly different level than the coastal resiliency plan. I think, and Vince can answer and can talk to that a little more knowledgeably than I, but I think that the hope is that, what we're doing is something that was asked for from Concom and from Coastal Conservancy and from other groups have said, we want to look at the long term. We want to look at the big picture. What are we going to do here? And, we're not looking at everything. So some of this is a reaction and I think a positive reaction to trying to do the long-term planning. If we had a magic wand, you'd go back 20 or 30 years and do this, but we don't have that. So we are where we are. And the question is, will this sort of help unstick something that is very polarizing right now? And so that my hope is that's what it does. I mean, there's a, sort of both sides are kind of entrenched right now, and maybe this helps unstick it.
Thank you.
Ian, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Fritz, for bringing this up. And I think I'm not sure I would entirely agree with Matt's observation that it was something that Concom actually asked for. We asked the town, my understanding as an individual member, because I can't speak for any of the other members, obviously, was that we asked the town to back our decision And that is going forward. And the decision was made from, I can only speak for myself, on strictly environmental grounds. And, you know, as someone whose family lived out there, I don't want to see the bluff disappear more than anybody else, you know. So if I wasn't a member of Concom, I might be discussing it at a very different level. But I just wanted to put that out there, that from my point of view, it was strictly an environmental decision about the dangers that hard armoring, of how destructive hard armoring is to the littoral system, which is something that the island is going to have to consider going forwards around the entire island. So, and so Matt, and you know how much I respect your opinion and how we discuss these things, but I just felt I needed to add that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Jen?
Thank you, Mary. I just wanted to say, and maybe this is Vince to you as project manager on this task, is that I would be concerned about the idea of limiting to just the options that are up here. That if there are other alternatives that make sense, that I'm hoping that they're going to explore those as well. As you know, there's more than one way to stabilize a bank. There's more than there are just a lot of options, and that the combination of options or alternatives is also, you know, presented and analyzed. I know that the, you know, alternative road access has been asked for by Concom since I sat on Concom, you know, before that emergency order was put in place a long time ago, that there needs to be a combination of options to address whatever happens out here. So I just hope that that is part of what's communicated with the consultants.
Absolutely agreed. So the other thing that's come up in preparation for this and trying to figure out the direction of this in some ways is people seem to kind of like the what was the sentence I wrote? To have response actions dependent on specific conditions, just like the surf drive thing in Falmouth. You know, a certain action happens, a certain event happens, there's a set response route that's already kind of pre-decided in some ways. That's one of the things that I would hope that might be able to give some direction to this. And also kind of speaking to Matt's point, that's something that everyone's going to have to contribute to as well, because this is all about building consensus to try and actually, to use Matt's term, take away the block, take away the jam, and find a way to move forward.
Vince, I think that phrase that you highlighted is going to be really important in the coastal resilience plan too, you know, not just here, and it's something we should keep in mind. You know, looking at a situation like Sheep Pond Road, would have been much better to have already negotiated the next means of access when we lose a piece of that road. And you know, I hope that the coastal resilience plan will identify situations where it would be good to negotiate alternatives in advance so that when something happens, we're prepared to respond instead of having to scramble and put people under the gun and, you know, have people suffering a loss of whatever infrastructure or access might happen.
Not to comment on things that aren't strictly necessary at the moment. Sheep Pond Road, the first meeting I was involved in with that, I think it was December 2019 or January 2020, and I was late to the game on that one. People have been working on that one in the town for ages. I'm sorry to say COVID killed that one, and then the tide got the rest of it. It is a sad situation. The town had been kind of working on it, but it had stalled. There's no two ways about it. So yeah, it would have been nice to have it.
Matt?
On the Sheep's Pond is, you know, we're very fortunate. There's a lot of NCF property out there. This is something that can be kind of put together in a week or two. And there's a ton of work, but you know, what are the events out, you know, 8, 10, 12 homes there, you know, spread out, and, you know, a handful are endangered right now, you know, in the next few years. I think it moved quicker than anybody expected. You know, we moved the road once already, not that many years ago, and here we are again. I think what it highlights, and we should come back with it to this committee, and I'm talking to Deanne about talking to her group about it, is the responsibility of the town under current law for roads and access and things is pretty substantial, and it hasn't really caught up with, what we're going to be facing over the upcoming years. If people do not want to do this willingly, then, you're in takings and months of legal and a bunch of other stuff that can drag on and be very expensive. And so that's, when I look at the whole picture of what, you take that as an example of what happens and how much work it takes and how long it takes. And, hopefully it is, sort of everyone's agreeable. But if they aren't, it's what I said at the select board meeting, if everyone's agreeable, we move along and they do it willingly. If not, then we need to we need to look at, if we're going to spend the time to do the takings and go through that, and then we should be doing something either further back from the bluff. We should be thinking about it differently. And so I think that's the thinking that has to go into Baxter Road. It is 5 or 10 times as many houses and a lot more, sort of potential for this to drag forever. So I think it's really important that we sort of realize that the state rules require the town to provide something that in some cases is very difficult and expensive to provide. And we can charge betterments, but then the people can fight the betterments and they can oppose the betterments, and they will put them on them. But so there's a whole set of issues, more than just, oh, well, it's time to move the road. There's a whole set of issues that is very complicated. And that's part of why the town is struggling. And we have so now you go to Sconset, we have agreements, sort of have agreements on the northern end, and we sort of have an idea what will happen when it breaches, and how they'll access from Pulpus Road. But there's a lot that would, it was in the $6 to $10 million range a number of years ago to bring sewer and water. And some of the talk was bringing sewer and water just across the road, from from the water side to the other side in the town layout. And that seems to me a waste of time. If it's going to keep eroding there, you need to bring that in off of Pulpus Road. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to think about these in the short term. What's the best way to handle it in the short term and not do damage? What's the best way to plan for a long term? And I think Sheep's Pond is a good kind of somewhat simple example of what we're going to be doing around the whole island.
And I hope I'm not naive, but I'm hoping that the coastal resilience plan will identify those issues, at least those that might be the most urgent, and begin that conversation to get people to agree before the plan is finalized that they're on board with whatever the plan recommends as a solution, so that we can begin that planning process and be prepared to move when we need to move. As I said, I hope I'm not naive about that. I think back to you, Vince.
I was rounding out the end of task 4 there. So the only thing that remains is, I was talking about the reporting phase, talking about how it might be like Surf Drive, and that was the end of that. And then asking for committee members' feedback and input along the way, both during meetings and potentially during crack meetings as needed, if that's acceptable.
I can certainly save space on the agenda for this project. One thing I noticed, this, according to the Arcadis proposal, this has the same timeline with delivery in September. That is probably going to mean that we are spending a lot of time listening to Arcadis as we flip and flop back and forth between the two plans, which is fine. That's what we're supposed to be doing. But just, I hope that they will coordinate their asks so that we can coordinate our meetings. And by coordinate, I don't mean that both plans come in at the same time. I mean actually the opposite, that we're not being asked to consider in the same 2-hour stretch 2 different plans and presentations. It would be better to keep them separate, I think. I don't know if others have an opinion on that. I'm not seeing any hands. So does anyone have questions about what our role will be with this second contract? Or questions, I guess, about the scope for Vince that he might be able to answer? Okay, seeing none. The next item on our agenda is public comment. So before we go to that, Peter?
I did have a question. Since it's for Baxter Road, will there be a representative from the Wisconsin Beach Preservation Fund involved in the planning of that? Will they be attending our meetings? Will they, I don't know.
Well, these meetings are open to the public. Anyone can attend. So it's a general open to the public thing. Anyone can come. For SBPF providing input, they're a stakeholder. They're a listed stakeholder. So I would assume that they'll have their part to say as all the other stakeholders will.
Yeah, that's how I understand it as well, Vince. And it's interesting when we even talked about this, it was interesting because SBPF was assuming that Coastal Conservancy was driving this and, it was what they wanted. And Coastal Conservancy was assuming it was what SBF wanted and they were doing it. And they were both kind of, sort of thought something was wrong. So it was, and so I think, I think you're exactly right. They'll be involved, as will other stakeholders, and they don't have neither party or the land council or anybody has a special seat at the table. We're doing what we're going where Arcadis and the and the public and Arcadis and the science hopefully tells us to go. So.
And for our meetings, I did anticipate the possibility that I as chair and Peter as vice chair would both feel the need to recuse from a conversation. And I have asked Gary Beller, who does not have a connection to Sconset, if in that circumstance he would be able to chair the meeting. He does act as the chair of the non-voting taxpayers advisory committee. And Gary graciously said yes, should that circumstance occur. So we do have a backup plan if needed. If there's no further discussion, I will open the floor to members of the public. I will note we have two people who are not identified with their first and last name. So if either of you wants to speak, please make sure that your name is shown on your Zoom profile. Is there anyone from the public who has a comment for the committee at this time? Rick, please go ahead.
Actually, Mary,
it's
not Rick. And I have been trying to figure out how I can change my identity, and I apologize. It's beyond my technical skill. And I'm Deanne. This has been a good conversation that I think has been helpful. Just 2 points that I'd like to make, at least in our thinking about coastal resiliency and making choices, and specifically the Baxter Road project, is that it helps us to think of it not as a binary choice. So it's not, do we do geotubes or nothing? And again, I'm so glad Vince referenced Surf Drive in Falmouth, because that was really an aha moment when we saw that presentation by Elise Leduc. It was almost a sort of a whole roadmap ahead, as Matt said, short, medium, and long term. And when we hit this trigger, then we can consider this option and that option. So that's exciting about this planning. But the question I have is that I've heard it said a couple of times that the Baxter Road project is going to provide a different level of analysis than the coastal resiliency plan is going to provide for other areas. And I think we're a little confused about that. I mean, we thought whatever Baxter Road is getting, the other areas deserve as well. So what won't the area, how do we differentiate, between those levels of scrutiny or analysis or an assessment or recommendations.
Vince, do you want to take that? Dan, I'm sorry, before you go ahead, Vince. Dan, you referenced we and us. Just for clarity, were you speaking on behalf of a group or just
Yeah.
for yourself?
Certainly, for the Coastal Conservancy.
Thank you. Vince?
Thanks, Mary. So yes, there's a couple of different ways to look at this. One of the big things that we're going to need from this Baxter Road project is a much higher level of consensus. I don't think there's any secret that this has been quite a controversial project, and that's the biggest thing that's going to come from this is the public engagement and the consensus building. That isn't going to be done to the same extent in the Coastal Resilience Plan. So there's one of the biggest key differences. The second big difference is with the Coastal Resilience Plan, they're going to provide options and a lower level of engineering plans and recommendations. With this, they're going to provide a much higher level of recommendations and potential paths forward. So I hate to talk about things in terms of percentages because these things have a way of being off. Best way analogy I can provide of sorts is that the Coastal Resilience Plan for any one area would provide a concept design to say 20-25%. This would provide a much higher level, go beyond the concept phase to come up with more realistic ideas that might be acceptable to the most number of people for the sake of argument. I wouldn't want to put a percentage on that. I don't think it'll be 100%. I think it'd be the 60 to 70, 80% range, but that is a guess. So a higher level is kind of my point.
Thank you, Vince. It's my understanding that out of the Coastal Resilience Plan would come recommendations for areas that need additional engineering. So if, for instance, pretend that Sheep Pond Road had not eroded, the Coastal Resilience Plan might tell us in September that that's an area where we should focus and do the engineering and the planning to provide a solution because it was a high-risk area. And so I think that this contract for Baxter Road simply anticipates what would have come out as a recommendation from the Coastal Resilience Plan to take a closer look and develop a higher level of plans, as Vince is saying, for that area. And if I'm incorrect, Matt or Vince, please provide more color. Matt, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think you are. And I think it's important to realize this isn't, by doing this separately, we didn't take away from any other area of the island. In fact, we may have, they're going to get the level of detail they would have gotten before, possibly a little more. We've just added more money and more detail to an area that that we know needs it right now. So, so it isn't a situation of, Mattocket isn't going to get attention now, or Surfside's not going to get attention. They're still going to get the same attention they would have anyway. We moved Baxter Road slightly higher because of everything, because it needs to be honest.
Thank you, Matt. Other comments? Members of the public, the floor is also open to you. I am not seeing any comments. So the next item on our agenda is new business and discussion of upcoming meeting dates and topics. So we have provided in the agenda the list of meeting dates through June. So we've just heard that potentially Arcadis will be occupying a lot of that agenda, and that's fine. I regularly ask committee members if they have other topics that they want to see on the agenda, and we're always willing to consider those. Some of the ideas that we have coming forward, the Envision Resilience Nantucket Challenge did do a survey, and they are tentatively scheduled to come in at our next meeting and present the results of that survey to us. I do have some ideas for other focus area meetings. So for instance, around the harbor is one potential topic that I'm trying to arrange people to come and provide a multifaceted view. If there are other suggestions, I'm happy to take them. Okay, I don't see any hands. Excuse me, Fritz, please go ahead.
Yes. I probably will have a suggestion relating to future topics when it comes down to committee reports. I don't want to anticipate. I'd rather wait then and just say that what I'm going to say in terms of the committee report may present a topic for consideration.
Okay. The other thing that we wanted to bring up, so the reason we have meetings scheduled through June, the town admin provides the calendar for us. We were appointed in June of 2019 to 2-year terms for the entire committee. And so I want people to begin to think about what happens in June of 2021 when technically those terms expire. There are a couple of things on an individual basis. If you do or do not want to continue on the committee, I would say please let Vince know so that we get an idea of where we stand on that. And then the second question is, it's not clear to me, and maybe Matt can speak to the intent of the select board when the committee was formed, but it's not clear to me what happens to the committee itself after June of 2021. I know that we were tasked with managing the not just the development, but also the prioritization of projects that might come out of the Coastal Resilience Plan. So since we won't have that plan until after June, my assumption is the committee will continue, but I don't know if there's a mechanism we need to trigger for that to happen. I don't know if we'll switch to staggered terms, if there's a vision for a long-term presence for the committee. I don't know if our mission would change based on the events of the last 2 years. So this is, it's a new committee, it's new territory, and perhaps it's just me. But Matt, if you can provide any additional information about that.
Yeah, the reality is a lot of times committees go over and we don't, and we aren't the administration, the board isn't following them, particularly closely, and they go over their date terms. My vision would be this committee continues and begins, it's in implementation mode. And at that point, I think a recommendation from this committee to the board would be appropriate if there were, terms and other, if we wanted to stagger terms and make other changes. But I would think that my guess is that we need that something like this committee has to be the watchdog in a positive way to make sure places like Sheep's Pond is, it rises to the right level, and that the Harbor Place and other developments that that coastal resiliency concerns are in place. So I would hope that this committee would continue forward, and and I don't think you guys are going to get out of it that easily. I don't think you can get out. You can't escape. You're in now. So
I hope no one is looking to escape. I think we're all very committed to the importance of the work and grateful to be able to have a hand in it. But I did want to mention that, in the context of upcoming meetings, so we should talk about, if we want to make that statement that Matt is talking about, what would we say to the select board, and what would we ask for in terms of extending the terms, staggered or just renew for 2 years, or whatever other options somebody might want to suggest. I wanted to bring that up as a future topic, so it's not really on today's agenda for discussion, but I wanted people to have a heads up with the background so that we can add it to a future agenda. Yes, Matt.
And I think that also, Vince can be thinking about how would he like it if, how would he like, does he want help? Would this be helpful? How would it be, how would it be constructed, et cetera, going forward? I think that's important because he's going to have to deal with it with us. So.
And Vince, I think also solicit Holly and Chuck for their input, since they are also people that we have been very involved with. Any further comments on upcoming meeting dates or topics from members of the committee? Right, seeing none, I also put a notice for the public that if you want to receive notifications from the town of the upcoming meeting dates and the agendas as they are posted, there is a sign up for email notifications on the town's website. There's a link on the agenda for that. And also looking ahead, September of 2021 is Climate Change Awareness Month. Kim Rose from Acclimate is working on a program. So if anybody has suggestions, reach out to them, or if you want to schedule that as a topic for our meetings to talk about what we might do in the context. September, of course, is when we expect the coastal resilience plan to be delivered. So that could be quite the month. Last year, we did do a proclamation, which the select board accepted for Climate Change Awareness Month. I assume we would do at a minimum the same thing again. But any ideas, again, coordinate with Vince and Kim on those, or request an agenda topic for something in particular. So the next item, committee reports. I will note that the select board did approve our partner memorandum with Acclimate. Thank you to the select board for that. So we are good to go there. Vince is holding it up to the camera. I think that's the signed copy, right, Vince? Okay. Thank you, Kimberly, for your congratulations. And I also attended, looking for my notes. Not that one. Hold on. Well, I'll come back to me. But I think Fritz, you had a note that you wanted to make a presentation under committee reports, and then we'll go to anybody else.
Yes, thank you. As a member of the planning board, I also sit on the Nantucket's Regional Planning Agency, which is the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission. We had a meeting last night, and one of the things that the commission does is, I'm not going to say administers, but it's involved in the solicitation of funds or presentation of programs to the State Department of Transportation for transportation needs and expenditures. Transportation includes bridges, roads, bike paths, not just highways and roads. And one of those programs is called a Transportation Improvement Plan, or TIP. And it's a 5-year rolling plan. It's reviewed annually, but it's a 5-year plan. And under that plan or program, we, the town, or the planning commission, is allocated certain funds based upon statewide factors. And under that particular program, the annual funds available run between $500,000 and $600,000. There are restrictions on what those funds can be used for, but what came up, and this is something that's done annually. So the timing is, it was brought up at this meeting, the February meeting. It could be discussed in March, but the planning process sort of ends in April, comes all to fruition in April and May, so that projects for which we would seek funding from the state under this program for next year, or for the current 5-year plan starting next year, would need to be completed in the next 3 months or so. That doesn't mean it's lost. That just means you roll forward to the next year, and you can do it for 5 years, but starting in the following year. But if we're interested in doing anything for this particular year, and I'm pointing out this because there are no projects currently in the hopper under this for the near future. And it's been for a lot of reasons, but anyway, it became clear last night that those funds could be made available for projects relating to coastal resilience, so that we meaning the commission, could put forward a project to the Department of Transportation, or a request for a project for use of those funds, again, $500,000 to $600,000 for the next 5 years, each annually for the next 5 years, to be used for transportation related projects. So some of the interesting thing that came out of it was the department, I'm sorry, the Department of Public Works, DPW, is already involved in certain types of programs, potential bridge rebuilding at Massasoit Bridge and out in Connecticut, discussions about culvert repair along certain of the roads, eventual rebuilding of roads, particularly along Pulpus, on the Pulpus Road in a couple of places. And there are others. But I'm simply pointing this out because a small group of us will be looking to see what projects we might want to put forward. And the advantage of this is there may be other sources of funding for these programs, but to the extent we can use $500,000 a year from the Department of Transportation, that could make funds that would otherwise be used for these projects to be used for something else. And so I'm just simply pointing this out to you. So I guess I'm saying is, if this committee or individuals have thoughts about what we, Coastal Resilience, would like to see some of these funds used for, I think we ought to try to think about that. And I guess what I'm saying is, and this is where I get to topics for future discussion, I think maybe we ought to put it on the agenda for a discussion, thoughtful discussion of what CRAC might ask NPEDC to put on the agenda in its project requests for this so-called transportation improvement plan over the next 5 years.
Fritz, to what level of development does a project need to be in order to be put on that plan? Do you need to have engineer drawings, or do you just need to have an idea or something in the middle?
We just need to have, well, I'm not an expert and it's very technical. Like I say, it's all run by DOT, and we have people that advise us regularly at meetings from DOT and the state about what the requirements are. And there are many. So I'm just throwing this out. It really, the eye opener was that this use of funds had really gone unused because of what we perceived as being the technical requirements that we couldn't meet. But it became clear at last night's meeting, once we started asking questions, that maybe there are things that are available. So it is intended to be, or not intended, given the allocation of funds, it is obviously for smaller projects. If you're talking about a project that's $500,000, that's not going to build you a new bridge anywhere, but it might go toward some part of it. So anyway, it is a limited amount of money, probably in the overall context of the town budget for infrastructure and transportation needs, but it's $500,000 a year for the next 5 years. So if we can find suitable projects that, I guess what I'm saying is, are smaller in nature, let's go for it. So
thank you for
that's my report.
Matt, and then Ian.
No, I think it's, I can answer a little bit. The further along you are in the planning, the better off you are if there's limited dollars from the state. And we've benefited at times by having plans ready to go. And I think, Fritz, when you're talking, I was thinking about sort of the bridges to Connecticut. That would be very popular if we could be raising those and add them to money that's already been allocated. That may be enough to raise those and increase the flow. The same thing with Sakatcha. Instead of making, hard arming Sakatcha Pond up to the road, maybe we could use that over the near term so the water flows to the other side and starts the wetland on the other side of the pond. So I think there's I think it's a great suggestion. So hopefully we can talk about it.
Quick question, Fritz. Did you have Rob McNeil scheduled to appear at your next meeting to discuss what projects he has available?
I would say that at last night's meeting, there was not a clear path as exactly who was doing what, other than I volunteered to, on my own, pursue this. And obviously, this committee was one of the ways that I thought I might pursue that. And so I think the next step would be to engage Rob on how we might do this. And and again, Matt's been on, by virtue of the fact of being a county commissioner, is obviously on, or has been on, the same commission. So he's quite aware of the tip and all of the issues in the past. I'm not an expert in it. But we've been advised that whatever it is, District 5, Department of Transportation, are the people to go to, and they are the people who we would ask all of the questions. So it seems to me that if we as a committee have certain thoughts, we probably ought to get together with Rob. We being, I don't know who the we is, but ought to be getting together with Rob to find out what's ready to go or what's close enough, and then to either have him or one of us or the committee or somebody from the commission to contact District 5 to find out how we can move this forward. And part of the problem is this, it's a little bit like grant writing. I mean, you need somebody going to the state and proposing it all in the right way. And the department of the planning department no longer has a transportation a transportation engineer on that has done this in the past. So the commission is sitting with really without the person or the expertise, specifically the manpower or the specific expertise to understand exactly what it is we need to do. But my thought is we shouldn't just not do anything for lack of the fact that it may not having some staff member that can just run with it and do the whole thing. Somehow we ought to be thinking about how we can put this together. And I don't know, can you help? Yes.
Ian, you had some comments and then we'll go to Vince.
Yes, thank you, Mary. And so, well, Matt pretty much covered everything I was going to ask. But to what extent does it have to be DOT related? In other words, could you have wetland restoration along the side of a road, for instance? And can only the town apply, or could Mass Audubon apply for wetland restoration along the side of Sacajah Pond after that's dealt with? As an example, is that something that Vince could handle, or who would call Department 5 at DOT to find out what was going on?
I'm not the expert but given the limited discussion we had, I think it has to be very directly related to transportation. And it also, I'm pretty sure, although I'm not saying absolutely, but I'm pretty sure it all has to go through the commission because it's a program that basically is available to regional planning agencies. And there are a number around. It just so happens that Nantucket's regional planning agency, the county of Nantucket is the same as the town of Nantucket, and we're unique in that respect. But Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, they also have regional planning authorities, and they have the same, I'm not going to say the same funds, but the same type of funds available to them. But I think it has to ultimately go through the Planning Commission, and it has to be directly related to some transportation improvement. But again, transportation improvement can be a bike path, not simply roads.
And I think Fritz's earlier point was that if there's a project that the town is already planning to spend money on, which is a road-related project, we can substitute DOT money and free up town money to work on something perhaps like wetlands restoration next to the project. So it's a little bit of a card shuffle sometimes to figure out how to take advantage of the funding. Was
Yeah.
my understanding from watching the meeting last night.
Okay. And at this point, I've exhausted my expertise in this area. So I'm really doing it more as hearing an opportunity last night and thinking that we ought to try to jump on it in terms of coastal resilience, because you know, $500,000 is $500,000, and it's a rolling, it's a rolling $500,000 over a 5-year period. So I don't think you can't take money. You can't say, well, we'll spend $2.5 million. I do know we can't spend $2.5 million today and say that's our next 5 years. It's an annual allocation or expenditure. So that does provide some limitations or restrictions. But my thought is simply somehow we figure out how to pursue this with Rob and with District 5 to find out how we do this, and can we do it, and what can we do with it. So it needs initially thoughts on our side, and then the who's going to do it kind of thing. And that's unclear at the commission level, although a couple of us have kind of indicated that we might kind of just try to run with it and then go back to the commission and see if they're willing to approve it.
So Fritz, the next NPNEDC meeting is March 15th. Do you need a response for that meeting, or what's the time frame?
I think it would be helpful because, like I say, is that it marches right along, and we only have one meeting a month. And the timeline, I can't remember whether it has to be approved in May. The tip has to be voted on or submitted in May. I think it's May, but clearly we only have a couple of meetings. So this is whether we can put something together for this year. I'd like to I think we could find something that's basically in Rob's hopper that relates to coastal resilience and float it out there and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, then at least we've learned something for the next round come next March.
I think that was part of the point that the DOT employee was making, was that even if we can't act today, we should act today to allocate future monies so that we aren't caught short again in a year. And I think one other thing he noted was that we are in the positive position of already having coastal resilience as a priority in our master plan or our strategic goals. I don't remember exactly what he said. So there is justification for using the DOT money on coastal resilience projects because the town has already made that a priority, which he said many other places had not.
Right, and yeah, Mary Ann, and I think from the brief discussion last night, I think most of the people on the commission who said anything would be happy to see us come up with projects, that are oriented toward coastal resiliency or rising water, flooding, whatever. I mean, as long as we can relate it to transportation, meaning bridges and roads, and culverts were brought up, can we use it to somehow work on the culverts in the low spots on Pulpus that might, even on a temporary basis, help. I mean, it might help with flooding issues and things like that, if we can come up with some specific need or project, that let's try to float it and get it in there.
So Vince, it sounds like we want to ask if Rob McNeil is available for our March 9th meeting to bring us up to date on what the possibilities might be. If you can reach out to him, and then if you have further comments on what Fritz has been talking about, please go ahead.
And I think we ought to, I'm sorry for jumping in, but I think obviously giving him a heads up on what we're talking about. And I'm sure Rob's familiar with the TIP program to some degree. I mean, I don't know to what extent we've used it for his types of things, but seems to me I'd certainly like to have him come to the meeting, understanding what we're asking, and so he's prepared to respond as to what might be available and suitable. And if that means somebody talking to District 5, the Department of Transportation, maybe Vince could do that just to find the parameters or something. I don't know. Unfortunately, there's no staff person at the commission, the Planning and Economic Development Commission, to kind of do the legwork on this. That's the disadvantage we have.
And Holly was the staff person at the meeting last night for NPNEDC.
Yeah, Holly's Holly, because of her past, is certainly very knowledgeable. So I think we could probably certainly draw upon her background and expertise. But given, she has other responsibilities, so I don't think we should assume that she can just take this for us and do it. But anyway, I think if we can work together, maybe with Vince talking to Holly and talking to Rob, maybe by the time we get to March, we have a little better plan.
So Vince, I had asked you for a comment, but I don't think we gave you the opportunity.
It's okay, not worried.
And I'm happy to do anything. Being on both committees, I'm happy to do whatever legwork can be done. I plan to, sorry for taking so much time, but I plan to go look at other area plans or other regional planning authorities to see how they've been using their TIP money and what kinds of projects, whether it relates to coastal resiliency or not, because it's just, I hate to see $500,000 a year just be unused.
Vince, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. So I will send that. I'll reach out to Matt for March 9th and see what he might come back with. Ideas that are in the hopper. I know that I've spoken to Matt about, not Matt, to Rob McNeil about a culverts grant for first and second bridge on the Madikit Road. So I know that he's at least thinking about those things. He'll have to talk more about that himself. Then Ian also had a question about who would be the correct person to approach District 5 Department of Transportation. I don't mind doing it, and I have no problem doing it. In some ways, it would be better coming from a town transportation person, which we don't have at the moment, but that's something that could be resolved. And in lieu of that, it's Rob McNeil, who probably be the best person to contact them. Multiple contacts from one town is fine. There isn't a big deal with that. It's just then various organizations then get confused. Hang on, I thought I was talking to one person in Nantucket, now I'm talking to two people. So it'd be useful to be clear who's the right contact person to go with, and then go forward from that. And then in terms of other ideas in the hopper, so the Coast Resilience Plan isn't delivered yet, obvious thing to say, but there's going to be a heck of a lot come out of this. And is there anything we could reasonably expect to come from the Coast Resilience Plan for a low-lying area, flooding area that we could start looking at? And I don't mean to bring up my favorites, but I'm always going to make a play for what can we do for Washington Street, Easy Street, the bottom of Broad Street, Easton Street, Walsh, all of those areas that are low-lying and flood fairly regularly. Harbourview, put that in there as well, of course. Maybe there's a project that the committee might think about developing to be ready for this kind of money.
And if I may, just to follow.
Go ahead, Fritz. Yeah.
Yeah, at last night, I'm sorry, Jen. At last night's meeting, Nat Lowell, who's the chair of the Planning Commission, specifically mentioned Washington Street. So I guess I would only, the only other thing I would say as we go along with this, somehow we ought to keep Nat in the loop as chair, so that somebody asks him who's contacting District 5 and for what reason. If it comes back to him, he at least knows what we're talking about. Anyway.
Fritz, to follow up on my question, is it okay to just have an idea, since this is a 5-year time frame, is it acceptable, or to what level of detail would be needed to say, in year 2022, we're allocating a specific project for the $500,000, and in year 23, 24, 25, 26, there will be other as yet unidentified projects to come out of the coastal resilience plan that should be able to be identified to use this funding. You know, is it worthwhile to just put that on as a placeholder, or is that even possible? That's kind of what I was wondering in that respect. Matt?
Yeah, a couple things. I don't think it's retrospective. You can't say, oh, we spent this money, give it back. I think it's pretty sure it's forward looking, the number one. The other point is sort of a warn Fritz about you got to be careful you don't go down a rabbit hole, because what happens with these things, sometimes it's a great idea and you do all this work, but unless the staff is on board and supports it and wants to do it, it ends up being something that kind of stalls or happens once, it doesn't continue. I think that we really need to get, and I've seen this for a while, I think there's a disconnect sometimes between NPDDC, planning board, the town, the various departments, and I don't think we need to find a way to pull those together, and we need to find a way to, you know, raise fees and do other things so we can hire staff that are available to do these things. Part of why we have the issues we have is that we aren't fully staffed, and we don't charge enough for fees, and we don't, you know, there's a lot of things that we need to do differently, and there's almost an inertia to this is what we do, that's good enough. And I think that we're seeing that it's not good enough, that we can't, you know, that we can't move things forward. So it's great that you and others of us will step in and do it, but almost, you know, having been at this a long time, we really need to sort of build up our bench strength in these departments with people who are willing and able to tackle this. You know, in the long range planning, with 3 or 4 years behind, I think, on, you know, on our master plan. I mean, that's a result of staffing as well. You know, so so anyway, I'm just warning you, I'm glad you're doing it and I'm willing to try to help, but how do, you know, I hope there are discussions at that level on how do we integrate planning through the town more fully, and how do we get the work done?
I couldn't agree more, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, further comments? Jen? Yes. And I do have a comment from the public that we'll get to when we're done with committee members.
Thank you, Mary. Fritz, thanks for bringing this to us. I agree that it's definitely worth looking at. I think we've already, in all of our numerous conversations, just talking about the island, identified places where we're going to have transportation related projects that are tied to coastal resiliency. And I think having, you know, a place to get additional funds will only help with the town. I like the idea of bringing Rob next week and just seeing if there's anything that's worth trying this year to apply for funding, and working through the town and maybe working out some of those kinks that Matt mentioned. As far as communication goes, maybe we try it this year, learn what that process looks like, and then come September, when we get the coastal resilience plan, go into analyzing it with the idea that let's put together a 5-year, you know, transportation related set of projects out of the plan. If we don't, you know, if we aren't successful this year, it could help us with that planning coming off the plan in the future.
And Vince, I had a question. I see you also have your hand up. I know that Arcadis's contract includes an offer to help with some you know, particularly timely project, not specified. Is this an area where they might have some expertise that could help us to get a project onto the tip?
Yes, so where Arcadis are at the moment is they're developing the risk assessment, and they're looking at where all the risk is. From that, pretty quickly, within the next couple of, by late March, early April, we'll have that delivered. I know that cuts the time down a bit, but think about it this way. They'll have the first indications of where the most risk are, and then can just give the really simple idea of where can this go straight away. But yes, they've also offered to be able to help with these kind of things. So yeah, this is going to be the low-hanging fruit. Let's grab it quickly and let's try and find a project. The second thing I wanted to say is partly at Graham's note, and also from an auto reply, same information two different ways. Rob McNeil is out of the office until March 1st, next Monday. So I've sent the request. I'll follow it up again early next week, but it might be short notice for the 9th of March. He might be able to, but we'll see. The invite is there.
Or if there's somebody in the DPW department who could speak just as well, it doesn't have to be Rob.
We're so understaffed. They're really,
Yeah.
he's the engineer.
Thank you, Graham. Other comments? Okay, let's go to Deanne.
Yes.
Deanne, yeah, please go ahead.
Really, thank you. You actually made my point that Arcadis does have within its current proposal for a coastal resiliency plan, the option to fast track certain priority projects. And in fact, they built 5% of the cost of the contract is specifically included so that they could work on those projects. And I'm thinking as you're talking, you know, about how understaffed we are and how much work DPW has, and perhaps some of the, you know, the engineering team from Arcadis could develop some plans for a high priority area like Millie's Bridge or Massasoit Bridge, and we can get it in quickly. And that would be that's part of what we're already paying for.
Thank you, Deanne. It is part of Arcadis's contract to identify funding sources, so this also fits in from that perspective. Further comments? So our general topic was upcoming meeting dates and topics. Certainly a healthy discussion around what's possible. Is there anyone else? I'm sorry, actually we were on committee reports. Is there anyone else with a report from the committee where they sit? Ian, please go ahead.
Concom's having a special meeting speaking about SBPF for their going over their 2019 annual report on March 22nd at 4 p.m. And they're asking for members of the public, if they wish to comment, have their comments absorbed into the meeting, to comment by March the 12th. So, but otherwise, as far as I know, all Concom members are hanging in there and none have fallen by the wayside yet. Thank you.
Ian, is there a document available that they are asking for comments on, or just general comments?
Yes, no, it's on the website. It's on the town website. So,
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Would you like me to provide a link via? I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. We'll include it in the minutes, although I don't. The minutes would be available March 9th, so it'd be a couple of days notice, but I would be happy to have a link shared out by Vince to the committee members to assist them if they're interested.
Quick
Yeah,
question. The way the Concom works, Ian can speak way more clearly to this than I can. That will be mostly written comments ahead of time, and then people can watch it on YouTube. Isn't that correct?
Right.
Right. Concom does not invite the public into the Zoom meeting for real-time feedback. It's provided via YouTube chat, which Jeff manages very well, but it's hard to provide substantial comment that way.
Right. So I think the comment will be via YouTube. There's nothing about in the notification I've got, there's nothing about inviting the public into the Zoom meeting itself. So
that's a good clarification.
Yeah. Thank you, Vince.
Other committee reports? Okay, seeing none. If there's no other new business, we will take a motion to adjourn. I will note before we do that, Gary had to step out for about 5 minutes and he rejoined at 11:30 in case we need that for the minutes. Thank you. All right, would anyone like to offer a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Peter. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gary, for seconding, and Jen. So roll call vote, Gary Beller.
Aye.
Peter Brace.
Aye.
Graham Durovich.
Hi.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Ian Golding. Ian, I didn't hear anything.
Aye.
Thank you. Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Chris McClure,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. And we'll see you March 9th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mary. Goodbye, everybody.